you, Shah. Can y'all hear me? Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Shah, go eat lunch. This woman has not eaten because she's working so hard for the festival all day, and I want to make sure she doesn't, I don't know, pass out. Yeah. Thank you. So welcome, everyone, and our friends who are watching online, or maybe will watch this after the fact online. My name is Lucy Gellman. I'm editor of the arts paper. I am also a proud member of the disabled community, or differently abled if you prefer that. And I'm really excited to be here today with some rock stars. So I'm just going to go down the line so you know who I am talking to, and then we're just going to get right into this discussion. So directly to my left is organizer, disability rights activist, just like Renaissance woman, vocalist, songwriter. She does everything, y'all. Elaine Kolb, Heidi Latsky, who is the founder and artistic director of Heidi Latsky Dance, and we will talk a little bit about the performance of Displayed that you can see tomorrow at 2 and 7 p.m. in New Haven. Councilman Justin Farmer, who is I think you came out of the womb as an activist. He is a lifelong activist. I've marched in the streets alongside Justin. I'm very proud to say that. And Donald Lee, who is a dancer and has been with Heidi Latsky Dance since 2016.
That's right.
And Jim Dion, who is our wonderful interpreter. Thank you, Jim, for being here. Sorry, and Nick Dion. I think I messed your name up. I'm so sorry. So we're going to hop right in. And, you know, Shah and I were talking about this on the phone, and she said, well, I want you to talk about the future of disability rights and disability justice. And I do too. But I feel like to talk about the future, we have to talk about the present. And this is meant to be a conversation, a really organic conversation. I don't always call on people, please don't raise your hands. But I would love for folks to jump in and just say, you know, where are we right now? It's interesting to be on the New Haven Green having this conversation, which is a place that is not accessible physically for everyone, and as someone who has mobility issues, I've experienced that firsthand. So where are we right now? Let's hop in. Anyone who wants to jump in? Donald, I saw you nodding.
I think it's very interesting. I think the pandemic has really opened people's eyes about what the idea of disability means to them. It becomes quite expansive, and it's not just physical disability, cognitive, it goes beyond. There's immunocompromised, intellectual disabilities, and people begin to recognize, wow, they may never see themselves as disabled, but I think COVID really unlocked a lot of the ideas surrounding access, around perceptions of disability, and that is a good starting point. Then people start recognizing all the social justice work that needs to surround and support that idea, access to medicine, access to your environment, access to education, and what that means, So I think it's, I do believe people have a greater awareness how disability and access is expansive in every area, part of our lives.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Oh, I always jump in.
I love it.
Okay, this is the thing. Disability justice has evolved in part because disability rights, although necessary, didn't go far enough. Disability justice is interracial, multicultural, intergenerational, intersectional, gender fluid, with cross-disability solidarity. We're everyone.
Thanks.
Rather than being just the largest minority, which is what we are also the only minority that includes all other kinds of people. We're everyone. And guess what? We're one of the few disadvantaged minorities that you can join at any time. So there.
Yes.
You know, and if you live long enough, we'll get you. Nah, 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 nah. So, at any one time, we are the largest minority. But if you look at a lifespan experience, it's a majority experience. Either you yourself will have a disability or you'll die really suddenly. Some people do that. Boom, gone. But most people will experience at least a temporary, if not a permanent, disability in their lifetime, or someone very, 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 very close to them will experience, and they'll go, wow, I had no idea. But the key is to understand ableism. That's what people haven't caught on to. And ableism is insidious, like racism and sexism and homophobia and classism and ageism and all these other isms that are yucky. But ableism is the assumption that it's not good to have a disability. To stay away from that. We don't want to talk about that. Get rid of them. I don't want to be that way. Disability justice affirms everyone as we are and as we are becoming, and sees potential in everyone in every form of life.
I also want to ask, and maybe we can just do a quick, like, yes, no, maybe. I'm so interested in your optimism, and I love it, Donald. I agree that the pandemic laid bare many, many things. And, you know, I remember, as someone who, so I'm hemiparetic, and I've been hemiparetic since I was in a car accident when I was a kid. And, like, for years, I've been asking about remote work. I know other friends who, for everything from cerebral palsy to endometriosis, have been asking about remote work. And they were always told by their employers, no, we can't possibly do it. Well, it turns out when there's a global pandemic, all of a sudden everyone moved real fast, and we went remote very, very quickly. And so I want to share your optimism, but I feel like we are in the middle of the great gaslighting of 2023, where, you know, President Joe Biden is like, y'all, COVID's over, it's great, we can go back. And we know the pandemic is still with us. And I think that several things that, like business owners receiving pandemic era relief, that disappeared. Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel like conversations are happening that weren't happening 3 years ago that are moving that needle forward, however slowly it may be moving forward?
I think so. I think I want to hop on what Elaine was talking about between disability rights and moving toward disability justice.
Yes.
That whole framework, like outside of the legal framework of compliance, there is much more awareness of inequities. And I think those type of conversation will drive, your administration, hopefully will drive policy, will drive interconnected social justice movement. So that's why I'm keeping, my optimism, and also working with Heidi within the disability dance world,
yes.
Integrated dance world, that because there is no framework about what does disabled dance look like, what does disabled education looks like, that we have to constantly invent ourselves, or reinvent. And I always say that access is an imperfect practice, because it's not like a checkbox, like once you check, and then you're done with serving the minority. It's a constant learning process, it's a constant engagement, it's a constant conversation we have with ourselves and with others within the disability world. And that's the hard work, that it does not stop.
Yes.
It's not stop. So if you don't have the optimism, then that's the end. I mean, the whole idea is that you need to continue to interrogate
yes.
yourself. And constantly need to reset your aesthetic values, constantly need to understand where did this thought came from. Exactly what Elaine was talking about, ableism sometimes is internal, that you don't even recognize that because it's so ingrained in your own, from your family or just from your friends or your peers, that you forget how ingrained ableism is within all of us to a certain respect. And there's so many, categories, beyond categories. It's just, it's just like transdisciplinary, ideas of how we should approach disability.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm learning so much just from attending, festivals as such, just to get these type of arts and ideas and opportunities to share, our experiences. So like, whoa, okay, this is an interesting way to approach this topic. This is an interesting way to problem solve. And I always believe artists are like the true problem solvers. We reflect society, we see what it is, and we try to tackle those problems. So, that's what's being put on display here at this festival.
Yes. Well, and I want to bring Heidi into this conversation. So Heidi, as Donald said, there was no framework, right, for disability and dance. And I think I've been thinking a lot about how disability in the media. Now, I'm a reporter, so I know when people say the media, they're also talking about me, and I'm like, okay, but in the mainstream media, disability is rarely depicted like either it's a net neutral or it's a negative. It is rarely a positive. It is rarely seen as something where people are taking lived experience and doing incredible things. And so I'm curious, for you, tell me about this intersection of art and disability justice, and also just thinking outside the paradigm of dance specifically, which is so, I think like dance and gymnastics are where people talk about quitting in their 20s, right? Because their bodies no longer do X, Y, or Z. And so I'm curious if you can talk about your own journey to founding Heidi Latsky Dance, and then, some of what you'll be bringing to New Haven and the company will be bringing to New Haven.
Yeah, so my story is that I started dancing when I was 20. I started.
I love that.
Yeah, but it was tough, because I got injured all the time, and I didn't know how to push my body in a proactive way as opposed to punishing my body. And by the time I started my own company in 2001, I'd been dancing for a good while, and it was very exciting. And then in 2006, I met Lisa Bufano, who was a visual artist living in Boston, and she got a grant to create a dance solo, and she wanted help with it, and I was the one that she commissioned.
Right.
And working with her changed my life. She was like the best performer I'd ever worked with. And ever since I worked with Lisa, I changed my standard of vulnerability and fierceness. But when I started working with Lisa, and then I started incorporating people with disabilities into my company,
Yes.
nobody wanted to see me anymore in New York.
Like audiences. Or are we
dance
talking
world.
funders? Because the nonprofit industrial complex and the arts are, like, that's real, right?
Yeah, the dance world was like, what's Heidi doing? What's she doing? It's community work. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not community work. That's not the case anymore. That's good.
Yes.
There has been an evolution. There's a lot more interest in an integrated or inclusive experience. There's a lot more interest in accessibility. So I think we're on our way. I'm with Donald. I think that there have been changes. I think the arts is so important to this evolution because you hope, it gets people in their heart, not in their head. And I think that's the way to change people's perception of who people with disabilities are, who a dancer is, who can be a dancer. You know, it's up for grabs.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Elaine, I would love for you to also jump in. So, you know, you're a practicing artist, you're a singer, songwriter, and poet. Have the arts always been for you the entry point? Because I know you've been writing songs forever.
Well, what I like to share with people about me is that before I acquired my physical disability, I was already a songwriter. And becoming a songwriter helped to save my life, literally. And what happened was that I was given messages and words and visions that helped me to survive. Before I had a physical disability, I had fairly significant mental, emotional behavior disabilities, which I had to try to keep hidden. Because I knew if I got caught, I'd be put away. All right? And what was happening was I was having uncontrolled breakdowns, hysterical breakdowns. And it was because I had suppressed and repressed so much. And part of that was, I later figured out, was being a lesbian. So, songs started appearing to me and were given to me, and without this gift, which has sustained me now through all this I've been through, without this gift, I might still be breathing, but I would not be alive. And then when I was injured 45 years ago and almost died, part of what it made it possible for me to survive that was that I had this gift. Oh, okay, Elaine, you're already an activist and you're already a songwriter. So this really sucks. You know, you'll never run again. You might not walk again. You might not even live. But you could write songs about disability rights, and you could be an activist. And that's what carried me through. And I'm 73 now. I survived being stabbed in the back, and I survived a train wreck. That'll get your attention, too, let me tell you.
Yes. So, I want to touch on many things you said, but something you said, and Justin, I want you to hop in here, especially. You know, where are we as far as understanding that disability justice needs to be intersectional? And people say this word, intersectional, a lot. I feel like it had a moment in 2020. Maybe it's still having a moment. But it's true. Like, when I think about it, disability justice also means being an abolitionist. It also means doing anti-racism work. It also means defending trans rights and the rights, especially right now, of trans people who, you know, a lot of states are trying to legislate out of existence. It means reproductive, all of those things. And I'm wondering, for you as a legislator, what are some of those conversations, especially because I know this year and last year, there has been some very real discrimination that you have faced.
No, thank you for that question. I think even the conversation and dialogue around police shootings, right?
Yeah.
We now recognize a lot of those people have mental and emotional disabilities, and we named that. I feel we're getting closer to making that connection and understanding that we have to transform from a carceral state to abolitionist state, right? I think in terms of making legislation, we now have to think about everything in an intersectional lens. And so the people who come forward with their whole selves into discussions about what can and can't be. I remember when I first ran, the person who inspired me in many ways to believe that I could do it was another person, Jamani Williams, who also has Tourette's, who is the public advocate in New York City. And to see someone like me on a platform with a disability, making laws, interpreting how laws can be made, inspired me. And now I get to be part of a community where more and more I see people with different disabilities bringing their concerns and considerations to the floor, not for themselves, but for the benefit of everyone. And so when we talk about disability justice, it's allowing those who are usually in the back to lead in the front. And that's how we know we're making progress. And so I would say places where I'm hopeful and places where I feel curious around, like for instance, the conversations around Dianne Feinstein, right? And whether she's capable and fit to be in office. I see people starting to be curious about what access needs would be there to allow a person to be there, and to see age and disability as not something that's scary, but something about how we accommodate and how we allow people to be their full selves. And so I'm inspired in that way, but there are also days where I'm just like, really?
Yeah. I mean, also, you've got other examples, and I think this is a good thing because 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, you didn't have it. But, I mean, I remember the first time I saw Tammy Duckworth, like a picture of her rolling into Capitol Hill, and I was like, hell yes. Hell yes. Right, and then she breastfed on the Senate. Yeah, it was so cool. But those, and those conversations, I also know, like, was it last night, 2 nights ago, you were in a meeting where a lot of people rolled in to oppose affordable housing, and that, again, like, that feels to me like a huge disability justice issue.
I think one of the things that is a great privilege is to have some of these conversations. So during the meeting, people were upset and raising their voices, and I remember at one point one of my constituents going over to the other group and asking them to keep it low on my behalf, and seeing everyone, despite the fact that they're disagreeing on whether affordable housing should be a thing or not, being respectful to the access need and just kind of imagining and seeing, like, oh, through dialogue, through discourse, through being in community, some of these things can be reimagined.
Yeah. So I also want to talk about movement.
Hey. And
that can be the way that we move through the world. But also I want to talk about dance.
Hey.
For you, Heidi, and also for you, Donald, like, was it always dance? Was it always dance that called to you? Like, well before you were 20, was it dance that called to you?
So when I was very small, I danced. Very small. But I was an incredibly shy child.
Yeah.
And so that was not an option for me to. I just
Yeah.
I shied away from a lot of the world. But when I was in college and getting a psychology degree,
Hey,
because I wanted to heal the world.
Oh, yes, of course.
I think you're doing that, by
Yes,
the way.
of course.
Yes.
Disco was beginning to be very popular, and I had a friend from Montreal, because I'm from Montreal, and he and I would go to the clubs and dance all night, and I fell in love with dancing. Like, I didn't want to stop. And so when I graduated, I started taking class, which was pretty painful because I had no technique. I had nothing but this passion for it. And I had to kind of find my way, and I haven't lost it yet.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I did.
I think you do identify these barriers to access that exist. Again, this is white supremacy in the arts, everyone. But that exists. So part of it is like there's a whole vocabulary around dance, right? And if you haven't done it for your whole life or a significant portion of your life, there's a really steep learning curve.
There's a steep learning curve, and your body struggles.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because you're doing things that are somewhat unnatural, and you have to keep training those muscles. So when you come into it late, you don't have those muscles, right?
Yeah.
You have to really work very, very, very hard. But it's been so worthwhile. And when I started working with people with disabilities, and I started learning, because I knew nothing about the disability community, and I started learning about the community and the needs of that community, I was revitalized as a choreographer. Like, wow, maybe our work together can make a difference.
Yeah. And I think like yes is so powerful, right? Just being able to say yes instead of no or can't or. And so Donald, you know, I also want to ask you about dance. And specifically, like, I love asking artists this question, like, what's going on in your body and like your heart? I know this is touchy-feely, but like your heart when you dance and your head.
Well, I think, I'm not a trained dancer. I came into dance late, much later than Heidi, when I first met Heidi back in 2016. So the idea for me is because there's no rules, preset understanding of dance, so there's no rules to be
Yes.
broken. So we kind of set our own rules, and I think a lot of disabled folks do that in whatever field they're in, whether it's in the arts, in politics, in music, in education. They need to find that. They need to break those, set their own rules and standards. And I think through working with Heidi, I kind of discovered, movement within a movement. And similar what Elaine's talking about with her own artistry and music, it's like she found that movement within her own movement. And, and then you start to look at your own movement as your own biography, and that's how I see myself as an artist.
I love that. And I think also like that rule breaking as a matter of survival, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think disabled folks are like the greatest hackers. We're just life hackers. We can't, there's no, if there's nothing, that we can't get from point A to point B, we have to find a way to make whatever life choices work. My apartment is not accessible. So it's like I have to, I use my chair as a ladder. I use my chair as a tool, a multifunctional Swiss Army knife tool. That's how I do it, because, I don't really wear my prosthesis all the time because it can be painful. And, and people, and even, going back to talking about ableism, like just sometimes you move around and people go, well, how disabled are you? You don't look disabled enough, so they treat you differently, or they have a different idea. This is not just with strangers, but it's also within my own family and sometimes my friends who knows me very well. So it's hard. So there is that, there is that feeling like it's hard to be optimistic all the time, and it's frustrating to always have to defend your disability. So, so those are the challenges I think people don't recognize, and I'm glad that Elaine mentioned ableism at the start of this conversation that we're having, that is a major issue that we need to tackle to break that, to break that cycle of, ableism, to move towards a justice movement.
Yeah. And I'm so interested, like, what are some of the, and this isn't just for Donald, but, anyone can jump in. I think what you've identified with internalized ableism is so real. So the NEA's Big Read book, which I don't know if folks have read, Sitting Pretty, the author of that book talks about how when she and her husband had their first baby, she could not wrap her mind around the idea that she was having a human child. And he was like, well, that's because you're living with internalized ableism. And it was like head exploding moment for her. Because she had internalized every message that she had received from the mainstream media, from the world outside, from people in her family that told her she, one, was not fit to carry a child, and two, was not fit to be a mother. And so I think that internalized ableism is so real. And then also what you identified, that idea that there is a hierarchy of being disabled is just like complete BS, right? And so how are we tearing down some of those walls with folks? Elaine and I earlier off mic were just talking about like not caring and how hard sometimes not caring is.
I guess one way is being in community. I know for me to figure out my own disability and how I could find those comfort zones and find those places where I can make my own rules was being around people who were different from me and inviting them into my life and being invited into their lives. I also think that one of the ways that we can actually have disability justice is being real with people. And so there are times where I'm not as honest about my access needs, or I'm not as honest about what is actually happening in my head or in my heart. And making sure to be more honest with people about that has been not only good for me internally, but I think it allows people to actually understand where people are and where they need to be met.
I think that's what Heidi was talking about earlier with working with Lisa Bufano. That's the idea of vulnerability and fierceness. And those things connected really, create like the vehicle for disability justice movement. That you need to share your vulnerabilities, because these are the gaps that we need to connect. And as a community, going back to finding support within your community, whether that be within the disabled community or non-disabled, just your broader intersectional community, it's critical. Just same thing with climate change, it affects us all.
Yes.
So like the whole idea you're talking about, like, the advocacy for trans rights, and all of these things, socioeconomic justice, everything is connected. So like when people begin to understand how much we are related and connected and how much vulnerabilities we share, I think people will begin to connect those dots and understand those gaps and put forth wherever their strength and move forward, fighting all the causes that we talked about,
I think we need to kick it forward a little bit more. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Ableism, yes, we have to address ableism. The thing is that we won't be making progress until we understand the insidious problems we have because we exist in a toxic culture.
Yeah.
We picked this up. It's not our fault. So blaming ourselves for one more thing that we don't have quite right is not helpful. Part of what we need to do is to, besides ableism, understand that one of the most powerful, hardly ever mentioned things is called disabiliphobia. It's like homophobia, only it's about disability. People are terrified. And the thing is, this is very personal for me. I had no idea. I had no idea before I got stabbed and was so physically fit. I had no idea how much of my identity was invested in my physical capacity. I was clueless. How could I know? And yet, I found that it was one of my deepest fears. And I had to face that. So I invite everyone to take that deep breath, and not in terms of putting yourself down or saying, oh, this is just another thing that I'm not very good at, shame on me. Because shame is another one of those things that is done to us and then we do to ourselves. Doesn't help anyone. Let's celebrate ourselves as we are, however we are, in whatever condition we are. Celebrate ourselves, acknowledge that we are loved, loving, and lovable. And if we can do this for ourselves and for each other, then that's when together we rise.
Love that.
I know. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. I also, before we open it up to questions, I want to ask about the role of joy. There's some joy makers up here. There is at least one person who has, no, more than that, two people, I would say, who have given me tremendous joy, Elaine and Justin. And Heidi and Donald, I'm sure if we hung out, you would also give me tremendous joy. But these are, folks who I've talked with, who I've been with in the streets. And going back to this, like, there's still this perception that disability is negative. And I think a lot of the times, either you see it as a negative, or it's like someone who's making a Netflix show had to check a box and there's a character in a wheelchair and they get like 5 lines and it's cute. So what is giving you joy? How are you putting that joy out into the world? Because I think that we cannot have justice without joy.
I love it. Well, my prosthesis, that's exactly what you're talking about. To just really highlight what people may think negative or broken, the whole idea of like inspirational porn, of that whole concept is just to celebrate who you are. Just going back to exactly the same conversation that we are sharing, it's exactly that. It's like putting the sparkle, in my life, and people are happy when they see it. They see the light shining from my legs, and they're happy. So, but it also makes me happy myself. Yeah.
And I will say they're amazing. They're giving like Lady Gaga, David Bowie, 14th century armor, like all the things, right? They're just. I said this beforehand, but super badass, and
thank you.
Really make me. When I was a kid, I wore an AFO, which is an ankle foot orthotic for folks who don't know. And the orthotist always was like, you can jazz this up, and now I wish I had. What a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you still can. So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I know, I feel like I'm going to go home with some glitter.
Yeah.
Where are we finding joy, y'all?
I'm finding joy here
Hey,
with you and with you and with you and with all of the people that are interconnected with this experience, because do people know this has never happened before? A non-disabled organization. It's been around for a long time.
You mean the festival?
The festival, the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, yabba dabba doo. Excuse me, but there has never been a non-disabled or not for the disabled organization that has had a whole series of events talking about ableism and uplifting people with disabilities in a positive way and giving us platforms, not just one, not just a tiny little, over here workshop so they can say they did the disability thing. This is a big deal. This has never been done. This is huge. This will go down, and I've said this before, but I will say it again. This will go in the annals of recording of disability justice as a breakthrough moment, and I want everyone here to know that this is a really big deal, and that gives me joy.
I love that. Yeah.
Heidi, what's given you joy?
My dog.
Yes, give it up for dogs.
Yes. I love my dog.
What is your dog's name?
Milo. So what gives me joy, and what's been giving me joy for quite a while now, is watching my dancers express themselves, giving them the space, the time, the direction for them to be able to really discover their unique physicality, emotionality, psychology, all of that, and then putting it out in the world just like that. We don't even wear makeup. I don't let anyone wear makeup anymore. And as a performer, we always wear makeup. I always wore makeup. And I felt when I started the On Display series that no, this is about being exactly who we are, as naked as we can be, and being proud and creative and excited just by that.
Yeah.
That gives me joy.
Yay.
Thank you.
The amazing young people I get to work with and work around.
Yes.
Every time I think I've know something or have experienced something, to have young people around me and to share their thoughts and their experiences and their understanding of what could be, that fulfills me, that fills my cup, that gives me joy.
I love that. So, y'all are giving me joy right now also. Oh, and there's a dog. It might be Milo.
Great.
I don't know. But for those of us who joined us maybe halfway, these beautiful panelists next to me are Elaine Kolb, who is a disability rights organizer in New Haven, West Haven, Connecticut, the world, the universe. Heidi Latsky, who is the founder and artistic director of the Heidi Latsky Dance Company.
Correct.
Hamden Councilman, and I don't know, all around badass Justin Farmer, dancer Donald Lee. And thank you so much to Nick Dion. Did I get that right? Thanks. Our wonderful interpreter, and Jim Cusack in the audience. We appreciate both of you. So I want to open it up to questions. Yeah.
Solo.
Yes, please.
God bless you.
I just said it, but my legs give me joy, or lack of legs give me joy. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes, and I also, sorry, I would be remiss to say before more questions, tomorrow at 2 and 7 p.m., which means there are 2 chances, you can see the Heidi Latsky dance. I'm sorry I keep saying the. It's just,
Everyone
yeah,
does,
love a
that's
good participle.
common.
But Heidi Latsky Dance Company performing, and if you, and it's displayed, but it's on the Arts and Ideas website as DISPLAYED. But if you want to see that, and you should absolutely want to see that, you can go to artidea.org and click on the handy dandy calendar function and buy your tickets. Other questions? Anyone? Going once?
We won't bite.
No, we don't bite. We're really nice.
So, Lucy, what gives you joy?
All of you. Yay. All of you are giving me joy. And the arts. I think, so many of us have spoken about this, but I think the arts are a pretty universal access point for folks who don't specifically find a way in. The way that we were able to talk about abolition a couple years ago through the Project Abolitionist Songbook, which was a beautiful intergenerational collaboration. There were people who listened to that who will not be at a march, who will not talk about the carceral state in any other way, shape, or form. And I think this is the same thing. There are folks who are not going to specifically engage in a conversation about disability justice, but they may come to a dance performance that changes their life. And so having the arts as that portal and that entryway gives me a lot of joy. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Fiona, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great sunglasses.
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to know, what would you imagine in an ideal world in terms of accessing the arts for all people?
For everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, repeat the question.
As many people as possible.
So the question was, what would you imagine in an ideal world? So I think that means no budgetary restrictions, right? Okay, cool. In terms of accessing the arts for all people.
I mean, what comes to my mind right away is that there are access to the arts for all people. All people, all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. I think it's a great question, Fiona, because I think in many communities, including this community, there is often an assumption that people who are living at the margins are somehow less deserving of art and art making and art consumption. So that's a great question.
I think also just changing the idea of what art means, exactly what you're talking about, like art as a commodity just for a certain population rather than accessible to everybody, and so people have that understanding like, oh, this could be high art or low art, or this is, I'm not into dance, I'm not gonna experience that. But, I think just working with Heidi, we do a lot of public site-specific performances in the public, and people would just walk through that they don't expect to see modern dance while they're walking their dogs and getting their coffee, and they stop and they begin to like have a different value about what art means to them, what dance means to them, what modern dance can be. And in a way, I think that is access, is to make art. It is exactly what Heidi was talking about. It's just make art accessible. Period.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think that we are at time. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to Hope, who is the production stage manager. Thank you to Sean McAllister, who is holding everything together. Thank you so much to the Festival of Arts and Ideas for allowing us to have this conversation. I don't know where Shelly Kiala is, but she's rocking it as executive director. Shelly, we appreciate you. Woo, woo, woo.